Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to another episode of the Whatever Man podcast, where we talk about whatever.
We damn well please.
That guy right there is MLK. I'm Theo, and on this episode, we're going to talk about black representation in all forms of nerddom. Comics, movies, television, sci-fi, fantasy, the whole gamut. And
yeah, man, I got some good stuff today. I hope you came with your A game because I got classic material here, man. I hope you selected some good things to talk about.
Well, speaking of classic material, recently it was released through Entertainment Weekly, set photos from the upcoming season of Luke Cage that shows Misty Knight with her bionic arm. Now, spoiler alert. Let's establish right now. We're going to be talking about Luke Cage, the Defenders, everything in that universe. We're going to be talking about Black Panther, as well as a bunch of other things. So if you hear a topic come up and you for instance, haven't seen the movie Blade from like 1998, and you don't want us to spoil the plot, go watch the movie and come back and listen to this podcast.
Who hasn't seen Blade? Who hasn't seen Blade, man?
I don't know. There's somebody out there living under a rock or something that hasn't seen Blade. I'm sure somebody exists.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Back to the Misty Knight arm, man. What do you think about it?
Look, I'm just excited to have it. I'm a comic book nerd. You know what I mean? I'm not even going to sugarcoat it or try to deny it. Comic books are my steez. And more than that, the Heroes for Hire, the Daughters of the Dragon, Power Man and Iron Fist, all of those comics have a special place in my heart from collecting in my early days and collection that I received from other people. So, seeing Misty Knight actually get her bionic arm, I'm stoked. Now, the bionic arm itself, one thing we got to remember when we see these set photos, they haven't put the TV magic on it yet. You know what I mean? The way that arm looks in the set photo will hopefully not be the way that the arm looks on television. If it looks like that on television,
then they shouldn't release the photo. Then, man, if it's not, what the hell? I don't want to see some dragon animation in Game of Thrones if it's not been done up yet. So I don't understand why they keep doing this. I don't understand. It makes
actually they do that stuff all the time. They show you like green screen sets. They do the show you Smeagol and the actor that plays Smeagol with all the motion capture bubbles all over his body. Like people like to see set photos, especially hardcore nerds like myself. Like I have faith that when they actually put that little stank on it, it ain't gonna look like that. So I'm not too worried about it. But I'm just happy to see Misty Knight with a bionic arm. That's awesome.
I tell you what is cool, man, is just all these. I mean, just seeing all these, black actors and whatnot. You get the Black Panther movie coming out, I think early next year. That movie looks phenomenal. Has an all-star cast. It really does have an all-star cast.
Really does have an all-star cast.
Yeah, I got it up right here, man. Andy Serkis, Chadwick Boseman, Michael B. Jordan, who's I love that guy since The Wire, when he was Wallace in The Wire, man. Sad as death.
Yeah.
Sad as death. Spoilers for The Wire from a show that came out like 20 years ago. I'm sorry, spoilers for The Wire, man. One of the saddest deaths ever, man. Forrest Whitaker's in this.
The same people who haven't seen Blade are the people who haven't seen The Wire. So that's
a lot of people surprisingly haven't seen The Wire, though. I will say that, man.
They're doing a disservice to their entire life if they haven't seen The Wire.
Great. I would call that the greatest TV show ever. I would put that. I would put that above Breaking Bad. And best TV shows I've ever seen. Yeah.
Different conversation for another day. We'll have to put a pin in that one. But I would make an argument against that.
All right,
but definitely, I think the greatest first season in any show ever. That's what I would give to The Wire. No show has ever had a first season as good as The Wire's first season.
Okay. All right. We'll agree on that. Okay. So But I mean, so when I see all these productions, man, and what we were talking about, earlier before we even started recording, was the fact that these shows didn't really exist. Really not even 10 years ago. I mean, definitely not 20 years ago. I mean, it took a long time coming to get a black showrunner. You know what I mean? And I think what we're talking about is where did this begin, and then how did we get to this point, right? I mean, how do you think we got here?
Yeah, I think when we talk about where this all started, we all have to bow down and pay homage to the Queen. I'm talking about Lieutenant Uhura, played by Nichelle Nichols. Back
how do you say her name? How do you say that?
I said Uhura. I don't even know if that's 100%. I don't think you have to make it as ethnic as I make it, but I love it. Uhura. It just sounds so
okay.
Ooh, love it. Just sounds like it's from the motherland. And
she's from Star Trek, right?
That's correct. That was the original Star Trek series. It aired between 1966 and 1969. The show, was about
at the height of Jim Crow and the Civil Rights era. Man, that's crazy.
Right, exactly. It's so crazy to think about the fact that, here you are, during a time where blacks were being, denied their basic civil rights. Denied the right to vote, denied the right to enter certain establishments. We still see, the byproduct of that racism today, and just overt racism today, especially with the recent political regime change. But
right,
with us being our age, my mom was born around the time that Star Trek, the original Star Trek, was airing on television. So I can't even comprehend, what they were going through. And she wasn't just a side character. She wasn't just the Starship secretary. You know what I mean? She was the communications officer. She was the lead of the communications department. And
that's right. Because everybody on that deck, right, was an officer. Right? They were pretty much in charge of the ship. They had specific tasks, right? Isn't that true? Exactly.
She was in charge of the communications department, and she was depicted as a smart, beautiful black woman, who was also an accomplished athlete, and just and was also versed in a multitude of different languages. So it really was a groundbreaking character, because up until then, no one had ever really depicted any black characters on television in that way, especially women. Women generally at that point were playing the Mamie role, the role of the woman who, has the apron on all the time and her hair tied up, and she's taking care of a bunch of white kids. Like, that was legit. Legit. Like, that's how.
I think of this meme. I think of it's a black lady pushing like a little white kid in the park or whatever, and like a bunch of people walking by, they're like, "That's not your baby,"
Exactly.
I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know why that's so funny to me, but it's probably not funny at all. But whatever. Yes.
No, and it was to me, like, I always look at it as such an inspirational time and an inspirational show, because the thing I love about Star Trek is not about space exploration. Like, at no point through any of its multiple iterations, whether it's the original, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, none of them are actually about space exploration. What they're about is humanity. You know what I mean? What they're about is the ideals of, like, let's picture a future where we forget about the things that separate us as human beings and focus on the things that bring us together. Now, once we do that, what can we accomplish? So to Star Trek, of course there was going to be a black officer. You know what I mean? Like, of course there was going to be an Asian officer. Like, the idea that 200-300 years in the future, that racism was still going to be a determining factor on what you could achieve career wise. Like, to the writers of that show, that just didn't make sense. Like, of course we were going to get over this pettiness. You know what I mean? Of course we were going to start to look at people for the sum total of their competencies and abilities, rather than just for their physical being, for their skin color, for their height, for their weight, for their attractiveness, whatever. All these things that go into the prejudices of how we judge a person based purely on sight. So that's one of the things I've always loved about Star Trek, is that I really do feel like these writers, more than other classical writers of like sci-fi fiction, were really able to believe in the ability of man to do better at some point. I always think back to The Martian Chronicles, which is one of my favorite books. And in this book, Ray Bradbury has us going to Mars in the year 1999, if memory serves me correctly. Now, I don't remember exactly what year the book was written, but I want to say it was like in the 40s or 50s. And then 1999, he has us going to Mars. But he also had us still segregated. How crazy is that? Like, you believe that at that point in time, we're going to be able to do manned space flights to another planet, but you can't even fathom the idea of them giving black people equal rights? Like, that blows my mind. Absolutely blows my mind.
I get that's crazy that you say that. I did not know about that, man. But I can totally picture that. I mean, some people can't get past the way things are and realize that, I mean, we're a progressive society. Every we have to evolve, right? But and those people
Exactly.
shouldn't write futuristic stories, because if you're so stuck in the mold, right, and think this is what it's going to be forever, then I mean that's just nuts. The next generation doesn't think the same as the last generation. I mean it seems so blatantly obvious to me. That's weird, man.
Yeah. And as an example of the influence of Nichelle Nichols and her character, Lieutenant Uhura, there's actually a great anecdote. She actually, there's a direct quote from Martin Luther King Jr. Now, there was a point in the production of the show. Now, the show
MLK, you say?
Yeah, yeah. So the show actually did not get great ratings. It was TV in the 60s. These people weren't making a lot of money, and
Really?
Michelle is Miss Nichols is a classically trained actress, and she had other opportunities, and so she was thinking about quitting the show. And Martin Luther King Jr. said to her, and I'm going to read the quote exactly. He basically told her that she couldn't quit the show because for the first time on television, we will be seen as we should be seen every single day. As intelligent, quality, beautiful people who can sing and dance, yes, but we can go into space, we can be lawyers and teachers, and we can be professionals. We are in a day, yes, where people don't see us that way on television until now. So that just goes to show, like, the leader of the civil rights movement was saying to her, like, what we do is important. My speeches, us marching, us having our sit-ins, all these things are important, but also what you're doing is directly representing us. It's important because what you're doing is to an audience that might not even know a black person, you are normalizing that we are no different than them. We can be just as intelligent, just as hardworking. We're capable of achieving all the things that they're capable of achieving if only we're given the opportunity. And that's why, to me, everything that we have in representation now in all these different medias, it all started with Nichelle Nichols and Lieutenant Uhura.
Well, that's crazy that MLK was I mean, it makes a lot of sense, right? I mean just to be projected in that light in a role in a of leadership and stuff. And I mean, yeah, I guess MLK would be all over that, right? I mean yeah, I feel that, man. So what do you feel about the new Star Wars and the new person they cast as her? Do you think that she captures that not Star Wars, Star Trek. That did you think she captures that same essence, really, or do you think it's not really about that anymore?
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. It's definitely still about that. It's always going to be about that. Now, Zoe Saldana is a lovely woman, and she, I think, does the role as much justice as can be done. I mean, you can't compare the impact of the original role to anyone who comes after her. Now, she has faced her own controversy for her portrayal of Nia Simone, because she was a much darker skinned woman, and then that gets you into colorism and not so much racism, and that's a whole nother conversation for another day. But I think that I don't want to, in any feeling I might have about her doing Nina Simone, I don't want to project that feeling onto her playing Uhura. I think she does a fine job in the role. I have no complaints. I personally really do enjoy the new Star Trek trilogy. It has its ups and downs. I know not everybody was the biggest fan of the second one, especially because the original, spoiler alert, Wrath of Khan, Star Trek II, the original movie, is really like a cinematic classic. And for them to redo it and make some changes, they took some liberties with the original story, and it was kind of corny in some ways. So, but overall, to answer your initial question, Zoe's fine. Miss Saldana's fine. I don't have any issue with her.
All right. Well, man, we're gonna have to do a Star Trek, the new Star Trek, right? Because I'm not a big Star Trek fan at all. I'm more Star Wars.
You should
anything,
be,
but
yeah, you're wrong.
Well, I mean,
you're wrong.
Well, possibly, but whatever. But I mean, I think we should definitely do at least the new trilogy of Star Trek. I would like to discuss that because it's interesting to me. And then since you got the history, obviously we can combine. You know what I mean? Because you got all the knowledge and I got the new stuff. You know what I mean? And it should be all right.
That sounds good. So what about you? What do you think has been a major influence to where we are right now as far as Black representation?
Well, you just killed me for the last 10 minutes, man. I mean, I thought this was going to be a joke, so I picked a joke movie, and now I feel stupid because I didn't pick something uplifting and to be proud about. The movie I picked is the 1997 historically bad flop Steel, featuring Shaquille O'Neal as John Henry, starring John. He's not starring John Henry. He's casted as the role of John Henry, who becomes a superhero, right? And he's a Superman-esque hero, right? And all right, so before you murder me and say, well, why the hell did you pick this? I wanted to show you like how bad it got for Black actors and in these roles, right? In these hero roles and things like that, because before we got Luke Cage and Black Panther and even Falcon from Captain America, right? I mean,
good point. Or War Machine from Iron Man,
right? Exactly, right. Before we got these roles, right, they weren't being cast for people like they just weren't being casted for because they didn't know what they were doing with superhero movies. Number one, in the 90s, and number two, the opportunities just weren't there unless you were already famous. So the only way Shaq even got this role because he was Shaquille O'Neal. And he was huge. Yeah. He played for the Orlando Magic. So this is 1997. He just came to the Lakers in 96, I believe. So he just got there. There's probably some sleazy agent, LA Hollywood agent guy who's like, "Hey, Shaq, you want to be a hero?" And Shaq's like, "Oh yeah, and that was a terrible Shaquille O'Neal impression. So,
Shaq.
I'm not good at. I'm not good at impressions, but it's not gonna stop me, baby. Anyway, so this movie features Ray J in the movie and a bunch of other non-characters. And I'm not even gonna tell you about the movie, but I mean, and it has lines like, "Show me the money." During a chase scene, the guy, Shaq looks at the camera. He has to chase a guy, and he says, "It's on now." And he chases another.
Hold on. He actually broke the fourth wall and looked at the camera.
Well, the camera was in front of him. I won't say he broke the fourth wall, but It was damn near the same thing, man. It was bad, man. And then he catches the guy. The guy says, "Back up off me before you get smoked." I mean, and then this is what I'm doing. There was a It's Hammer Time reference in there. Oh, I mean, this is what I was watching the movie. I was watching the movie and I was just writing down. I said, I can't believe they're actually saying this. I mean, it was an awful movie. Just synopsis of the movie right here is Shaq's in the army. Shaq's in the army. He has this female lieutenant or whatever who's like his partner. Then there's another lieutenant. Shaq's a weapons manufacturer. He makes weapons for the army. He's high power weapons or whatnot. And the bad lieutenant, who's obviously clearly comically bad, like cranks up the power on the weapon so he can see what the damage he can really do. End up killing a couple of the people. His partner, Sparky, that's her name. She ended up becoming paralyzed.
I totally forgot about the partner until you mentioned it. I totally forgot about the partner. That's hilarious.
What? She's paralyzed. So you have seen this movie?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Not in like a decade, but yeah.
I watched it 3 days ago for this show. It was the hardest hour and a half of my life. I was like, oh my God, okay, just 10 more minutes. You can do this. You can do this, MLK. Man, yeah, so it's bad. I mean, there's no point even going through the whole movie. But anyway, he gets out of the military. Then he realized that the other lieutenant's out there on the streets too, and he's selling the weapons that Shaq made into like gang members and stuff like that. They're robbing banks using his high power weapons. So he suits up. He grabs Sparky, who's paralyzed. She's kind of playing like the God, what's the girl from Batman sidekick, Barbara Gordon kind of role, you know?
Yeah, but the Oracle role, yeah.
Yeah, the Oracle role. She's sitting there she's playing that kind of role to his fake ass Superman. And man, the costume looks terrible. It's just awful. The movie cost $16 million to make, and it was a terrible flop of 1.2. It only made $1.2 million in theaters.
That's impressive.
It's impressive to be that bad. I mean,
yeah,
I feel like Shaq could have bought one. I mean, it's awful. The ending doesn't matter. None of it matters. I wrote 3 pages full of notes. I literally couldn't make it from scene to scene without writing something I wanted to say about it. And I was like, I can't go on this podcast and talk about each and every one of these things. So I won't even bother. The movie was awful. The point is, oh yeah, Ray J's in the movie. Who knew his career trajectory at the time? So that's crazy. But man, the movie is straight trash, man. And for some reason it's on HBO right now. HBO Go. I don't yeah. Don't watch it, everybody. Just don't. Unless you just like bad movies. But it's the worst, man. But the point I'm trying to make here is that this is where we went to. That we were casting these comical roles. We had these cheesy one-liners because that's all. Nobody took black actors at the time seriously. I'm not gonna say nobody took them seriously, but no one gave them the opportunity to really show what they can do, like they're doing now. You know, with the Luke Cage and the Black Panthers and stuff like that. You know, even with white actors in the '90s, those movies are really hard to do. You know, actually, I think what it really stemmed from was the Batman series, Batman Forever, Batman and Robin. At those times, those movies being so comical and kid-like, and I think, this is a DC movie. Keep in mind, this is the DCEU, ladies and gentlemen. Like this, this is where they start. Don't forget, this is in there.
You also got to remember, in their defense, like we talk about them being childish, but like comic books at that point in time were still viewed as a medium for kids. Now, nowadays, you know, there's probably more adults reading comics just for nostalgia purpose than there are kids reading comics. But
are there any kid comic books still left? I mean, these comic books I feel they're all pretty dark and adult like. I think comic books is no longer for kids. I really don't feel that way anymore.
Yeah, I mean that's not a bad argument. I know I bought my nephew some comics recently, and I really was like sitting there kind of thumbing through the pages, making sure that they were appropriate for like a 7-year-old, you know, before I sent them. So There that is true. I don't think they're definitely more adult. Like when I was a kid, if you wanted the more adult content, those were generally graphic novels, and then comic books still had like the kid stories, or the at least
Okay.
the at worst the young adult, the adolescent, teenage, whatever range you want
Oh,
to
the
talk about.
tweens. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
then, yeah, definitely there at some point there was a turn and comics started getting more and more graphic and handling more adult material.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Was was The Watchmen a graphic novel? A novel? I know it was a graphic novel, but was it a comic book first that they just compiled into a graphic novel? Because that came out in the 80s, right?
Yeah, no, but to my understanding, the Watchmen is a graphic novel. That one is definitely like they do sometimes do that. I believe they're called anthologies when they do that, when they take a series of books or a series of comic books rather, and put them all together in one book. I believe that term for that is an anthology or something.
Yeah,
But
Walking Dead did that with their comic books. Yeah.
yeah. See, and I didn't know that.
Yeah.
See, I'm not really a Walking Dead guy, but I always thought that one was a graphic novel. I didn't realize that was a comic.
Oh no, they come out with an issue every 3 weeks, 5 weeks, something like that. Yeah, I read it. I read Walking Dead. I wait like every 3 or 4 months. I wait till like 3 or 4 come out, and then I'll read them all. They're way better than the show, by the way. Way better.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
well,
think everybody
yeah.
seems to agree on that one. The show is kind of lost me over time for sure.
Right. All right.
Um,
Sorry, I digress, man. I'm sorry, but don't watch Steel, please, for the love of God. All right, and I'm just so happy. This is the lowest of the low. Shaq's not even an actor, and and here he is in a quote unquote blockbuster. So whatever. So what do you
so
got, man? Please pick us up from that. Please pick us up.
what I would suggest while you're not watching Steel, what you should watch is a little show on NBC called Timeless. Now, NBC's Timeless, if I just tell you the premise, you're going to ask me, why is this even in the show, right? So, Timeless is basically a sci fi time travel show. It's all about this company that made a time machine. The time machine got stolen by a crazy guy. The crazy guy goes back in time, and so they got to send some people back in time to stop him using another time machine.
Is this the plot from Terminator?
Very close, right? It is. It is very. It is for the most part. It's your run of the mill sci-fi show. We have done time travel a bunch of times before. I think this is the best depiction of time travel that we have ever seen on television, and I'm gonna tell you why. First of all, the inclusion in this show for especially for a network television show is really impressive. The guy who owns the company that produced the time machines is a black man who also happens to be a genius, who recruited one of the main characters, Rufus, who was another black man from the inner city, and gave him an opportunity to elevate his life. And,
obviously.
Yeah, well,
like
okay,
Rufus?
that's the one thing elevate his family. The other, the trio that goes back in time, it's Rufus, it's Wyatt, and it's Lucy. So Lucy, white woman, Wyatt, white male. Wyatt's just a muscle though, and he barely even talks half the time. Wyatt is just there for when somebody needs to fire a gun. Lucy and Rufus really are the heart and the brains of the show. They keep the show moving. And I love the fact that they show that American history has warts. And that's what this show is about American history, because the villain, Garcia Flynn, who took the time machine back to the past to try to stop this shadowy organization that controls the whole country and actually killed his wife and son. He is only dealing with American history because that's where they have dug in their roots. Basically, this group came to power right before the American Revolution and kind of weaseled their way into seats of power. Like they've had senators, presidents, all of that have all been a part of this group at one time or another. So
Okay.
basically, they go back in time and they deal head on with situations where, Rufus isn't even allowed in the room because he's a black man. Or Lucy starts speaking and everybody looks at her like, why is this woman talking? Because she's a woman, and they don't shy away from dealing directly with issues of slavery, with sexism, with racism, and they don't make light of them, you know what I mean? And they don't lecture you on them either. They just let you know that, look, let's not forget that this is a part of our history. This is a part of our past. We need to acknowledge it because as long as we refuse to acknowledge it, we can never like do better in the future. And I also love the fact that they include so many black historical figures that are obscure. Like they don't do an episode on Martin Luther King Jr. or Malcolm X. They go and they did an episode on the Lone Ranger, who, the Lone Ranger is a character, you know what I mean, that has always been portrayed as being a white male with a Native American sidekick. Whereas,
wait,
are
you about to tell me that the Lone Ranger is black? I can't believe that. I can't. But I've never heard this before.
The Lone Ranger, if you actually, according to historians, if you actually cross-reference like the descriptions and some of the feats that were supposedly accomplished by him, the Lone Ranger was a former slave turned Texas Ranger, and in Texas, that was a black man by the name of Boss Reeves. So they were I'm pretty sure the first medium ever, on the large or small screen to portray the Lone Ranger as a black man. And they just did, mind you, like they just did a Lone Ranger movie, by the way, with Johnny Depp playing Tonto for some reason. That was
that movie was really bad.
So
yes,
bad.
And you're right. I just googled it. Here's an article. There's even a photo. What?
Yep.
All right,
Boss
that is
Reeves.
an obscure fact.
Yeah, Boss Reeves. Crazy. So the fact that they were willing, like I said, I don't think that's ever been introduced in any form of media before. So, props to them for that. Also, they did an episode where they went back to the Apollo 11 mission and met Katherine Johnson, who was a mathematician and physicist that was involved on the Apollo 11 project.
The Hidden Figures, Taraji
Exactly.
P. Henson movie. Yeah.
Yep, the Taraji P. Henson movie. And interestingly enough, that they did this episode before the Hidden Figures movie came out. So, props to both for shining a light on a woman that has been ignored by history. How many times has the Apollo 11 mission story been told and never is the fact that there was a black woman that was intricate to its success ever mentioned, so, and of course, they take these characters and they put them in kind of fictional situations. They dramatize it a little bit, but the point is just the inclusiveness of it. It's really, really inspiring. And I'm so thankful that when, NBC initially decided to cancel the show, the fans actually spoke up and demanded, that it get a second season. So we're going to get a second season of Timeless. I'm going to assume probably not a third, but that's fine. I think they can find a satisfying conclusion to the story. And I just hope that in the second season, they continue to do what they did in the first season as far as being inclusive and showing history in America for all the warts that it really has.
So, is this show is it on Netflix or something like that, or do I have to refer to the black market? How do I watch this? I mean,
it's an NBC show. I think NBC has its own app now because all the major NBC, ABC, CBS. Yeah, everybody's got their own app now. It
All
might
right,
be on
cool.
Netflix though. I would definitely, if you can find it on Netflix, maybe Hulu, something like that. I would recommend anybody that gets some time. It's a fun watch. It's an easy watch. Sit down, watch Timeless. It's definitely worth your time.
I like what you said about how they're not afraid to show what it's really like, you know, because I've seen some shows recently. I just watched a movie, We Were Soldiers, right, about Vietnam or whatever like that, and they got this one scene in the show where this it's obviously post Vietnam because it would be too real to make it during that time. Anyway, it looks better than 70s era um cinematography. But in the movie, there's this white lady. She's sitting around like a group of other ladies or whatever, and she's like, I went to a laundromat and you can't wash white clothes there. And everybody's like, what? What are you talking about? She's like, yeah, right outside the laundromat, there's a sign that said whites only. And it was like, that means, you know, no, yeah, it was dumb. It was ridiculous. And she was like, oh, that means, you know, black people can't come in there. And then she goes on this rant, like, what do you mean they can't come in there? You're going to judge somebody by the color of their skin, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, number one, like, where the hell have you been? You don't know this in that day. And number two, there obviously is a post-era thing, and they're trying to, you know, make this one woman try to justify what it was. And I mean, I hate when I do that. I hate when I see that. So I really like it when they go and they're like, hey, this is the era, this is what it is, you know, and nobody bats an eye. Nobody's bats an eye. Black people ain't batting an eye, white people ain't batting an eye. We just saying, hey, you know, this is what it is, you know, and there's going to be times when people, you know, go back in time now and do stuff about, and they're going to be like, oh, I can't believe, you know, gays had a hard time getting married and all that stuff, blah, 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 you know, and they're, you know, like, cause this is what it is, this, you know, so tell history how it is. Don't be scared of history. You know what I mean? Because
Exactly.
how you gonna know where you're going if you don't know where you came from, kind of thing. You know, it's that's my all right. I'm off my soapbox. I'm sorry.
Nah, you're good. You're good. So besides the joke of steel, what you got? Anything you feel like
yeah,
had
I
an
still feel like an
impact?
idiot. I really wish you would have picked the joke, man.
Come on, you got an
uh,
opportunity to redeem yourself.
Oh yeah, so I mean, shoot, Blade, right? The movie that I'm revoking cards if you haven't seen. Okay, so Blade is the movie. It came out 1998, right? And this is where things began to change, not only for black actors and black culture and these sci-fi hero movies and whatnot, but this is where it actually changed for the Marvel MCU and that influenced the DCEU as a whole, right? Because Blade is a movie. It had starring Wesley Snipes, of course. There were some more actors. Little known fact, about to be widely known because we're on a podcast. I am terrible with actor names. I am terrible at recognizing them. I'm terrible with names. I'm not good at that. That's what you're for, Theo. Please save me because I can't. I'm not good at this stuff.
I can't make any promises. I'm pretty hit or miss with it myself.
You seem pretty. You're a lot better than I am, man. Way better. I don't know anybody's name. But so this movie right here is starring Wesley Snipes, and this is Wesley Snipes off the back of he had a couple of hit movies. He did New Jack City. I think he did White Man Can't Jump. And there was another movie that he did before this action movie. Oh, I think he did Demolition Man as well, right? So he's getting established as a star, and so they cast him in this movie, and he's Blade is a vampire hunter. He's a half vampire himself, and he is just the coolest man of all time. The very beginning of the movie starts off with this guy going to this rave thing or whatever. A girl takes him to this rave, and then they got blood just coming out the sprinkler systems, and then they all turn into vampires. This guy terrified or whatnot. Blade walks up in the club single by himself with his sword and just cuts through all of them. I mean, and I was really scared when I watched this movie again the other day, right? Because I loved this movie as a kid. I had a VCR in my room. I had like 3 VHSs growing up as a kid, and Blade was one of them. So I would watch these movies every night. I was one of those people who had to sleep with the TV on or whatnot. So I watched Blade every single night, and I loved that movie as a kid. And then I was when I watched the other day, I popped it in. And I was like, oh god, they're about to ruin another one of my favorite childhood movies. And I was surprised. I might like it better now than I did then, right? Because I understand everything now. But I mean, it still holds up. It holds up the test of time 20 years later, and it's a classic. The action is good. The graphics are surprisingly very well done. Considering it's 1998. Yeah, and I mean, all the effects and whatnot. I mean, it's a good movie, great characters. The villain is menacing, and you actually feared him. Only thing I think falls flat a little bit is the final scene. The final boss fight was kind of weak, but I'll forgive it, right? Because the movie was just so amazing the whole time. Blade, and this is the reason why this movie is so special in the big scope of comic book movies, right? Is because at the time, Marvel Studios was on the verge of bankruptcy. In fact, I think they actually filed for bankruptcy a couple years earlier. And Blade New Line Cinema approached them about making a vampire movie, a Blade movie. So they needed the rights to the character Blade. Marvel sold the rights to Blade to New Line Cinema. New Line Cinema makes their movie. They make $70 million, which was really good for a rated R comic book movie at that. Starring a black actor, right? Go figure. At that time. And the funny thing is Marvel only got $25,000 flat fee for the rights of Blade.
That's criminal. That's the highway robbery right there.
I don't know what the hell Marvel was thinking. Were they that down on their luck when it was Marvel homeless?
Yeah.
Like you can have Blade for a sandwich. Like what?
Stan Lee was sitting outside with a cup in front of a cardboard box. Yeah.
It sounds like it, man. It sounds like it. But I mean, but anyway, what did that do? They realized that they can sell a lot of their character rights and get their company back on their feet, right? So what came next? X-Men, Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, and I want to say somebody else I can't remember. But those are the main three, right?
Ghost Rider, but it's not really worth remembering. That's what sold Hulk, which I think Universal made 2 Hulk movies. And
Hulk. Right. Is there any more? That's all I can think of, right? Okay.
Yeah, those are the only ones that come to my mind.
Right.
I think they sold. Well, I should say Daredevil. God, that movie was awful. I almost forgot about Daredevil. Daredevil, and then Elektra followed that, and there were more. And don't forget, there were actually a lot more licenses that were sold. They just never, the companies that bought the licenses never produced the movies, and then the characters went back to Marvel. Every time they sell off a license, there's a contract where if they don't produce a film within a certain amount of time, the rights go back to Marvel. Like, for instance, Black Widow, who's a current member of the Avengers, her rights were sold off to somebody. Don't ask me who, I can't remember. And they never even got around to making the movie. So the rights went back to Marvel.
Same thing happened with Iron Man, because with Iron Man, they didn't get the rights back to Iron Man until they said like a year or so before the movie came out or something like that. I don't know. It was the original Iron Man movie that came out with the MCU. But so they sold those rights off, and Marvel made that. They made a quick sell money. They made a quick profit, cash in hand kind of moment, right? But then when those movies took off like they did, X-Men was huge. Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2 was through the roof and phenomenal movies that, and Marvel's not getting any money off of this, which is crazy. You think they would put some kind of royalties clause in there or something, right? But who knows? They were hungry for cash. So they sell off, they actually get above water. And I can't remember the guy who approached who worked for Marvel, but he comes in and says, we need to set up our own cinematic universe. We need to make all of our movies in-house, and we need to keep 100% of the profit. And so that was a huge gamble. He said, I need $525 million, $500 million basically, to set up this studio for a company who just got out of bankruptcy. But they gave it to him. They gave it to him. They got financing from a bank. They got financing from JP Morgan Chase Bank. And now if they failed to pay this loan back, like, they would have lost the rights to like 10 characters. Captain America, Cloak and Dagger was another one. I can't remember all of them, but they were significant characters they were going to lose the rights to, and so they had to put up as collateral for paying back this loan. And then the first movie that they come out with is Iron Man, which Iron Man, as you know, is a huge success, which leads on to the Avengers character movies, and then eventually the Avengers, and then which led to the sale of Marvel to Disney for $4 billion.
Which is just a crazy number when you think about it. To go from bankruptcy to $4 billion in the span of what, 20 years?
Like 10. I think the Disney
right,
sale was like in 2012 or something. Like, yeah, you're probably closer, right? Probably like 10, 15 years.
15 years.
That's a hell of, yeah. I mean, right, but the point I'm trying to make is that this was all built. What we have today, Avengers, Guardians of the Galaxy, Doctor Strange, all these classic movies, not classic, but all these movies that we have now, is all made off the back of Blade. And I was a black actor who they took a risk on, and it paid off. And so, I mean, Blade is actually, so you haven't seen Blade, you have to go see it now, because Blade has brought you more joy than you can even possibly imagine.
Absolutely agree. And Blade's a good movie. Like, it's like I said, I probably haven't watched it in about 10 years now, but now that you talk so much about it, I'll probably have to pick it up this weekend on Netflix and sit down and watch it again for old time's sake.
No, it's not on Netflix. I mean, I rented it on YouTube. That's what I do. If I don't have a movie, I just rent it. It's like $3 to rent something on YouTube. Google already gets all my money, so shut up and take my money, Google. But yeah, watch Blade. Do not watch Blades 2 and 3 for the love of God. Don't watch those movies.
Don't watch those.
Don't you feel like the MCU is getting a little crowded right now?
No, I mean, I don't feel that way.
You don't get that feel? You just shut that down. All right.
No. They could make 12 movies a year, and I would watch 12 movies a year. I love this stuff. Give me more. Give me more. I don't have comic book movie fatigue. That's never going to happen for me. I was a kid, literally going to the grocery store because there was no comic book store near me, and buying these however much they even cost. I don't even remember how much they cost, but buying these comic books off the little magazine shelves, saving up my my extra lunch money or whatever so that I could just see these stories on print. Seeing them, being an adult and seeing them on a screen, there is no such thing as too much. I want more TV shows. I want more movies, and I want as many of these to include, the black superheroes that I loved growing up as possible, including the subject of my soliloquy for the week. I like to call it Flashback Issue Friday, because I want to talk about Cage issue number 1 from 1992. Now, this one is particularly near.
Is this the soliloquy?
This is the soliloquy.
Ready for the soliloquy? Hey, okay.
This is
yeah, let's do it. No, but I'm saying, hey, y'all, just want to let y'all know, soliloquy is a word. I heard Stephen A. Smith say it one time, and I was like, I like that word. So basically, it's our soapbox. Theo's got the first one. So without further ado, I need to have like a song or an intro or a gong or something.
Yeah, one of these days we'll figure out an intro for the soliloquy. You also have to help me pronounce the word, but we'll leave that alone for now.
Screw that. Whatever. Go for it. Yeah, you have the stage.
So I like to call this one the Flashback Issue Friday because I'm a big comic book nerd. I love back issue comics especially. Like, the stuff today is good, but I just, all this stuff from my past, near and dear to my heart because it reminds me of my childhood and happier times and yada, yada, yada. So one of the first, I believe it was the very first comic that I ever bought was Cage issue number 1 back in 1992. Now, Luke Cage is just a special character to me anyway. I've got a ton of Luke Cage, and Power Man and Iron Fist comics. One of my favorite comics, as a matter of fact, is a Power Man and Iron Fist comic. But Cage issue number 1 has a special spot because like I said, it was near and dear to my heart. It was the first comic that I ever bought. And it also was a story of Cage actually leaving New York and going to Chicago and working, getting actually hired as a hero for hire, which is another comic series, another title to one of his previous comic series. Hero for hire in Chicago. That it was actually a Chicago newspaper that hired him to come out there and fight crime, and then give them the exclusive stories on his crime fighting. So, one of the reasons why Cage was always an important character to me is that Cage literally reminded me of my dad. My dad was a strong black brother from New York City, who fell on the wrong side of the law and ended up going to prison. Now, the only difference between Cage and my dad is that my dad didn't come out with superpowers afterwards. But when I was reading these comics, in 92, 93, 94, all the way up until my dad got out, in 2000, that was me reading about my dad to some extent, and it made me feel closer to him. So half of my comic collection is from my dad. I got comics from the 60s and 70s that he handed down to me, and so I actually sent a few of those comics to my nephew for his birthday, because he's around the same age as I was back then. So I feel like I'm passing on that legacy or whatever. So just that's my soliloquy for the week. I like to call it Flashback Issue Friday, Cage issue number 1. Check it out. Give it a read when you get a chance.
Yeah, I'm gonna check that one out. I mean, I didn't know that about you. I didn't know that. I know all about your dad. That's cool, man. When you can relate that, to personally. It's crazy because it's always about it's like when you hear a good song, think about you hear an old song you haven't heard of, and you immediately start thinking about where you were in that life when you really liked when that song came out, or and so I understand, and man, that's good. That's deep stuff, man. But all right, so shoot, I guess this that about wraps us up, man. What you got anything else on your mind, or what's up?
Nah, man, that's it. Loving doing this podcast with you, man. Ready to do some more. As always, you can find me on basically all the social media at Blurting Out. That's blurt like nerding out, but with a BL instead of an N. And look forward to the next show.
Yeah, and I'm Malcolm Lee Kennedy. Like I said in the last episode, this is episode 2, y'all. So work in progress, but we're doing all right. I think. I don't care. You're not paying for it, but it's yeah. Like I said, I'm not really ready to promote my social media. I got a website. I got the Twitter handle. I got the Facebook and all that stuff. I haven't had time to set it up, man. I'm really just trying to get this content out because this is what it is, and that stuff just feels like work to me, So it'll get there when it gets there, y'all. Yeah, but with that being said, thanks for listening.